On Good Friday each year, we mark the crucifixion and death of Jesus in advance of celebrating his resurrection on Easter Sunday. This belief that Jesus really died and really rose from the dead is central to Christianity. St. Paul candidly admits in the first letter to the Corinthians that if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then our faith is useless. So if we don't believe that the resurrection literally happened, then we might as well stop being Christians. Skeptics of various types have challenged the truth of the resurrection by challenging whether Jesus actually died on the cross at all. A variety of different theories proposing this exist in the works of rationalists, such as Carl Friedrich Barth, and in various forms of Islam. For example, could Jesus have actually just fainted on the cross and then come back to consciousness when he was placed in the cool air of the tomb? Or could this have been a planned hoax, where Jesus took a drug to make him appear dead and then woke up later? Could Pilate have been bribed to take Jesus down from the cross early before he died? These theories are often backed up with details found in the Gospels. For example, there are some details in the Gospels that sound quite implausible. Luke's Gospel seems to suggest that as Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane before he was arrested, he was so distressed that he was sweating blood. This sounds like a made-up detail by someone who doesn't understand the physiology of sweating. Also, after Jesus died on the cross, John's Gospel describes how his side was pierced by a spear, and both water and blood came gushing out. To some, this sounds more like fantasy than accurate eyewitness testimony. Also, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, was astonished by how quickly Jesus had died. Does this mean that it was unlikely for Jesus to die so quickly? Lee Strobel has addressed these questions in his book, The Case for Christ. He gets his answers from an interview with a medical consultant and research scientist, Alexander Metherell. Let's have a look at how they answer these objections. First, Christians believe that Jesus was sweating blood while he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, in line with Luke's Gospel. Jesus was in deep psychological distress for a number of possible reasons, the most obvious being that he knew he was going to go through horrendous pain and torture. With this in mind, Dr. Metherell argues that the idea of him sweating blood wasn't as far-fetched as it sounds. There's a relatively rare condition called hematidrosis, in which someone is so distressed that their capillaries break down and release a small amount of blood into their sweat. It makes sense to think that Jesus was in enough distress for this to happen. So Luke's detail of Jesus sweating blood, instead of making the Gospel sound fantastical and made up, actually supports the idea that Luke really was writing based on eyewitness observations of something that really happened. Secondly, there's John's detail that blood and water came out of Jesus' side as he was stabbed after he died on the cross. This, like sweating blood, sounds fantastical and made up. But again, Metherell argues, there is a modern medical way we can understand this. If our heart and lungs go through intense strain, it's possible for liquid to build up in the membranes around the heart and lungs, called pericardial effusion and pleural effusion, respectively. When someone is crucified, they're slowly asphyxiated, causing intense strain on their heart and on their lungs. Therefore, it's likely that Jesus could have had this same fluid build up around his heart and lungs, and this is what came out when he was pierced by the soldier. Again, this detail that initially sounded implausible actually gives the testimony credence. An untrained observer like John probably didn't understand why water came out of Jesus' side, but he recorded it, and now this observation gives him credibility as an eyewitness. Thirdly, there's the fact that Pilate was astonished by how quickly Jesus died. Does this mean that it really is more likely that Jesus just fainted and later recovered? To answer this, we have to think about everything that Jesus went through. He had been flogged, so had deep wounds all over the back of his body. and he was suffering from severe blood loss from the flogging. Many people would die from a flogging before they were crucified. He was probably in hypovolemic shock because of having lost so much blood. He had wounds all the way through his hands and feet. His arms had dislocated, and he had been asphyxiating for hours on the cross. Finally, he had been stabbed in his side, apparently piercing his lungs and heart. The idea that he could have survived this is already beyond belief, but the idea that he survived and then was able to walk around soon afterwards, like when he met his disciples on the road to Emmaus, is just bizarre. The Roman soldiers were professionals in executing people, and they would have been executed themselves if they had failed in their duties. And as for the people who think that the crucifixion was an elaborate hoax, if you wanted to fake your own death, to me it seems like a crucifixion would be just about the worst way to do it. So, all told, I think we can be pretty sure that Jesus really did die on the cross. That's all for today. As always, please like, comment and subscribe if you want to support the channel and get updates on future videos. Thanks for watching.